finale of The Americans, Season 5, Episode 13, The Soviet Division. I was obviously hyped for this episode. Like I said, this has been a fantastic season. Even though the season has been a little bit slower than others, I still have really loved this season overall. And I have to tell you that because of how slow this season has been, and because of the more, not meandering, that's not the word, but because the more mundane, slower pace that we had, I didn't really know what the season was going to be, and I expect it to be really riveting because we've been building up to something really big. I really felt like we were crescendoing to something huge, and while that was the case, just like last year's, this finale did throw me for a loop. I definitely will say that. But it's not necessarily a problem because the show is riveting no matter what. This was still a hugely gripping finale that really does set up a lot of the implications of what's going to end up happening in the last season. And I've said it before and I'll say it again, this was their most crucial finale. Whatever happened in this finale directly coincides with what happens next year. And while this wasn't like a huge momentum, momentous finale like I expected to be, there still is some pretty big stuff going on that I definitely do want to get into. And it definitely did make me rethink a few of the things that I thought we were going to get in the show. And I'll talk particularly one huge event that we've all been waiting for. I don't know if it's really going to happen now, and I'll get into that at the end of this video. But let's just get into this finale because the first like 10 or so minutes were so riveting, and I thought the whole episode was pretty much going to be like that. We had that fantastic cliffhanger last week where, Tuan just revealed to Philip and Elizabeth that he tried to get Pasha to slit his wrists, and obviously they're freaking out. They're banging on Pasha's door, but there's no answer. So immediately, that's not a good sign. And of course, Tuan just revealed to them that he convinced Pasha to fake a suicide attempt to get his parents to move back to Moscow. And Philip is freaking out. He's furious that Tuan would do something that's so crazy. I mean, obviously, they need him to go to crazy measures, but nothing to this extent. I mean, they just need to make sure that the kid was miserable so that way they could move out. Obviously, it's terrible what they're doing, but I mean, that's just the kind of thing that they do. So obviously, they're upset and they're scared that they're too late and that Pasha may die, and we're also terrified. We don't know if Pasha's actually alive or not. So Alexei and his wife pull up. They invite Philip, Elizabeth, and Tuan in for some beers, and they're trying to act as natural as possible, which, I mean, Philip and Elizabeth, they're used to this, but they really did a great job of keeping up appearances here, and everything's fine. So they're totally oblivious to what's actually going on with their son. Tuan heads upstairs, finds Pasha in his room, and he pretends to be shocked. He's unconscious, and he's bleeding from his wrist, and he screams for help. Elizabeth is calling 911, and Alexei and his wife then run upstairs. They keep pressure on his wounds, and she's shocked when Alexei runs outside, and he literally grabs the FBI agent out of the car for help. Like, why would he do this? I mean, he's Russian. Why is he feeling this way towards Americans? And especially for someone like Elizabeth, who, as we know, has always kind of had this hatred for Americans and always kind of seen them as the enemy, really until this season. I think she is starting to turn around a little bit, but she's so shocked that someone like Alexei, who is a Russian, would react this way. Alexei, though, as we know, is different from some of the other characters that we met. After the ambulance leaves with Pasha, Alexei explains to Philip that the FBI agent is their protection. That's what they're meant to do. They're there to protect them, and the Americans assigned him to watch over them since they defected from Russia. That's what this whole thing is, that they're supposed to be his protection. Why shouldn't they utilize them? And I think that's, again, something that this episode really does get into, is that this whole Russian-American hatred is kind of meaningless. Like, it kind of just escalated from nothing, and that's very much what was going on in the Cold War. I mean, we all thought all of the Soviets were this certain way, and Soviets thought all Americans were this certain way, and as we've seen throughout the course of the show, that's not really the case at all. I mean, many Soviets aren't the way that, Elizabeth and Philip would expect them to react, and Americans as well aren't the way they expect them to react, and I think that's something that they're really starting to realize, and something that is a big meaning, I think, not for just this episode, but this entire season in general, is that Elizabeth, Philip, and Stan have each realized that Americans are not this certain way, and Stan's realized that Russians are not this certain way. So then in the driveway packing up boxes, and Stan says that a pipe actually bursted in Renee's building, so she has to stay with Stan for a month, and he heads in the house and updates Elizabeth on Pasha, and of course, Philip is still obviously very suspicious of Renee because of everything that happened with Martha. We don't really get into that in this episode, though, which I was surprised about. A lot of the really big things that we thought were going to happen don't happen in this finale. We still don't know at the end of this episode if Renee is in cahoots with the Soviets or not. We still don't really know about that. So basically, He heads in the house and updates Elizabeth on Pasha. Basically, he stopped at the hospital, and Pasha is getting better, and his parents have decided his mother will return home to Moscow with him. Alexei, however, is refusing. He doesn't want to go back, and it looks like Tuan's crazy plan might have actually benefited them, which I'm glad. I didn't really want... I was interested in seeing how this is really going to go. I kind of expect this to go a Season 2 route, where things are just absolutely crazy, but that's not really the case here. Things are completely fine, and they're actually in the clear, it seems. But Alexei, for some reason, is abstaining. He wants to stay in America, and basically, Philip is doing whatever he can to try to talk to him. Like, why would you want to do this, obviously? Why would he want to do that? And basically, Alexei, turns out, is too scared of the repercussions that he will have to face for defecting. I mean, he's just come to really enjoy America. Remember that whole speech he gave in the first episode? He's not really a huge fan of Russia. There's a lot of things that he really does not like. He likes the conditions that the, Soviets receive in America a lot better than the way they get it in Russia. And that's a big deal of this episode, because as we know, Philip and Elizabeth throughout this entire episode are contemplating a huge life decision of, do they really want to move back to Russia? And as we've seen throughout the show, it's really not the best case. I mean, Russia's just not at all a good place to be right now. It's not safe. It's constantly being, flooded by a bunch of agents. I mean, it's probably the most dangerous place you could be. It's even more dangerous than America. So basically, we know they're planning on quitting the center and moving back to Moscow too. And Elizabeth confesses she wants to actually take Tuan with her before the center ruins him. And you can tell she's grown a fond attachment to Tuan. And we've seen that throughout the show, that even though Tuan isn't actually their son, they very much treated him that way. I think they've really developed this bond, and they don't want Tuan to end up like them. That's something that Philip and Elizabeth have really gone through their entire life, and they don't want anyone to be in that position. So before Tuan, is ruined like it did to Philip and Elizabeth, they're going to try to take him with them, and he has his whole life ahead of him. They don't want to have to they want to try to hide him as best as they can and get him out of the center, because they don't want him to have to go on all of these crazy missions. And again, I think shooting that couple really just made them realize a lot of things, that they just don't really want to do this, and they don't really think anyone should have to do this. And I agree, no one should really have to do what Philip and Elizabeth do. I mean, that's something they've been tasked to do their entire life. But I think it's interesting that they were trying to get him out of there. So we see Stan and Adderholt. They meet up with Sophia, and we get one scene of this plot. I was very surprised. We only get one scene. And once again, this did not go at all the way I thought it was going to. Basically, they're with Sophia's boyfriend last week, who we know was kind of shady, where he pressured Stan into hiring him for Intel 2. They did not at all suspect. They thought that maybe they were being stood up, and that this guy is not to be trusted. Turns out he actually passed the test with flying colors. So, yeah, everything's fine. As long as he didn't cheat or something like that, it seems that this might just be a decent guy, believe it or not. I was surprised too, but yeah, it seems like this guy might actually be good for them. And this is a really big moment for Stan, really. I mean, again, we've seen throughout the season that he does not treat Soviets as the rest of the FBI agents do. He has this deep sympathy for them. He really does understand, and he sees them as people. And this one moment, again, doesn't seem like a big deal, but really is the catalyst for a much bigger Stan moment we get later in the episode that I'll talk about. House hasn't raised any alarm about their presence at the scene of the attempted suicide. And again, I think he's really surprised here. I mean, you would think that they would be exposed, and I think that's what we kind of thought were going to happen too. And the fact that that didn't happen, I think, again, it does show that not all Americans are bad. And that's, again, kind of something that they're realizing here. So they urge Claudia to keep the family together when they return to Moscow. They want to make sure that that's what happens. They don't want this of a family. Work better if Alexei stays in America, since that frees up, his wife even more to conduct her having an affair, and this will let her, sustain that affair, obviously. So, she says that no one's going to roll out a red carpet for him. So on the way home, Phil and Elizabeth are speculating about Paige helping Henry to adjust in Russia. Again, they kind of think that's all just gonna work out. You can tell that they are, they're set, they're ready to go. It seems like they're going to Russia, and even though Henry is so on the outs about, what's going on, what's actually going on and what his parents actually do, Elizabeth thinks that Paige would just help him deal with it. And again, they're just not really thinking through what they're really doing here. So you can tell that this is something where they just kind of want to leave. They're not really thinking of things that actually do kind of matter. I mean, obviously, Henry doesn't know what's really going on. that is a large factor in them leaving. And if Henry doesn't really know, then this could end up even worse for him, really. However, like I said, I think the age that Henry is, he kind of has that mentality that like things might work out better for him because he'll take it less emotionally than Paige does. But Elizabeth thinks that it'll be good without all this shit on their backs, that they'll be able to be in a better position. But again, as we know, Russia is just not really a great place to be. So back home, we get this fantastic scene with Paige that I really did love because we started to see last week that Paige was really starting to transition. And we've seen it throughout the entire season, but more than ever last week when she basically, she got rid of her cross. She's done with the religious stuff. She even says that in this episode, which I'll talk about. But she sees this news report basically on the TV about President Reagan's notorious radio joke. It's all about President Reagan's notorious radio joke saying he signed legislation outlawing the Soviet Union and that they're going to begin bombing in 5 minutes. And to Henry, this is just sort of just like a sick joke. He doesn't really think much of it. He could easily turn away. Paige just can't do that. She is completely riveted by every second of that TV, even though she knows very well that it is a sick joke. She's so deep into this world now and so deep into what's actually going on with Soviet Russia that it is more imperative now than ever for her to really focus on what's going on. I think, again, that laser focus that Paige really does have, it shows that she definitely is, for real about becoming a spy. And that's a turn that I thought is very interesting the show has taken. But again, I think it's just kind of inevitable. Like when your parents are so deep into this, how can you not get away from it? It's kind of hard to do that. This is just something that she was kind of forced to do, and now you're realizing that that's kind of who she is. And I think that whole scene, again, it really does show the growth that Paige has had throughout the season. I've heard a lot of people say that, oh, Paige is very confused, but I wouldn't say that. I'd say this season she really has, understood what she really wants to do. That being a spy, that's really what she wants to do. She tried to have that normal life for a while. It obviously didn't work for her. She is ready to become a full-fledged KGB spy, and now whatever she listens to, she listens more intently than ever, almost as if she herself is, a Soviet, part of them. And I think it's very well done the way this scene was handled. It just really did show the drastic difference between Henry, who is all American, and Paige, who by definition is American, but truthfully, and I think in her heart, she really is a Soviet. So absent. I don't know why he wasn't in this episode, but he was not here, and I don't know if it's because they're setting up his demise possibly next season, which I do think is happening. I don't. There's no way in hell Oleg is getting out of the show alive. There's just no way. Instead, that was substituted for Martha. Yeah, we saw Martha in this episode, and I think this episode confirms more than ever Martha's going to be a vital part of the show next season for sure. We see back in actual Russia, she is now practicing her Russian, and she's watching school kids play in a park, and I guess the translator there telling her that they're orphans and that they're cast off sort of like her, and that they want her to be happy. And she looks at the kids, and there's this little girl named Ola, and there are tears in her eyes. And basically, it seems like this is the key for Martha to finally get settled in within Russia. I know I've said it before that there's no way for things to, turn out well for Martha, that she's going to commit suicide, and that's how her arc's going to end. Now I'm not so sure. I mean, we know one of the things she really wanted with Clark was a kid. She really wanted to be able to have one with him and have that relationship and start a family. And now this girl might be the key to her finally finding some sort of semblance in her life, which I think we all kind of want for Martha. I mean, let's face it, Martha has really been through the ringer and back, and I think more than ever now, it's time for her to really start to get her shit together. And I think the first step to doing that is by adopting this girl. This is not the first time we're going to hear about her. I think this is really going to help out Martha, and I would not be surprised if she tries to take the next step in possibly adopting this little girl. I think that definitely is going to happen. So we'll have to see the way that goes down. But I really did like the scene. I didn't really know, again, I didn't really know if Martha was really going to be a part of the show anymore. But the show has really surprised me, showing that Martha is still just as important. I think next season is definitely going to be a big part of the show. So we'll have to see really what happens there. But back in the States, we see Tuan and Philip and Elizabeth drop by the Morozov house, and Tuan gets to sit with Pasha on the bed. And obviously, things are kind of awkward between these two. I mean, Tuan did cause his almost demise, where he tried to take his life, and Pasha seems happy to be heading back to the Soviet Union. And obviously, that's kind of what he wants to do. He'll get away from it all, and Tuan says he's sorry, it was just a stupid idea, and Pasha tells him that it worked. He genuinely wanted to go back to the Soviet Union. I got the impression that Pasha liked Tuan bullying him because he wanted to get the hell out of there. He just didn't want to be in America anymore. It was too dangerous. There were just too many things going on that he was not okay with, and he wants to get out of there as best as possible. So he really was okay with Tuan showing him how to slit his wrists. He really didn't care, and I like that Tuan is regretful, but it seemed like Pasha was okay with it. So downstairs, we see his mother's blaming herself for not seeing the signs of his depression attempt on his life, which he clearly has had throughout the entire season, which, we kind of saw it since the first scene of this season, which, as we know, was a scene between Pasha and Tuan, which I thought very well kind of put the season full circle, where we have that scene where Tuan is meeting Pasha, and now we have a scene where he's saying goodbye to Pasha. I thought, again, it really did put things full circle. And upstairs, his father tells Philip that if Pasha tries to take his life in the Soviet Union, he's not going to survive. The doctors there are not really that great, and they don't have the medical care that they do here, which is one of the reasons why Alexei wants to stay here, because the security's just better, the doctors are better, things are just better in America. And truth be told, yeah, I mean, he's not wrong. We saw Russia is really not a great place right now, because the doctors there, I mean, they're good, but they're not good compared to American doctors. And Philip is trying to pressure him to go back with them, and Alexei's saying no, that's not possible. And after the way he left, if he goes back, they will throw him in jail to die like his father. And obviously, he doesn't want that. And I think, again, he did a really good job of explaining why he didn't want this, and why he wanted to stay there as best as he could. I think deep down, Alexei obviously does want to be with his family, but he's kind of realizing that he just doesn't really belong there. Pasha and his mother, they belong in Russia. He is a true American. Again, just like Paige is a Russian in her heart, I think his heart really belongs in America. That's really where he does belong. I think he's most happy there. I think he just enjoys the American atmosphere better, and I think that really is where Alexei belongs. This is something that Philip can really relate to. Philip is someone who, yeah, he's also not an American, but he's really gotten acclimated to that world, and I think that's kind of what's happening to Alexei here, and I really do love that comparison between the two that we've had throughout basically this entire season. I think definitely Alexei's a character that I've definitely really enjoyed, and I'm hoping we're going to see him again next season, because if the show does stay in America, I think definitely we are going to see more of Alexei, and I'm interested in seeing really how that is going to play out. I really did love the way this was done. It was very tragic, but I think it really was inevitable for Alexei to stay there, and I thought definitely this was, again, very well laid out. So afterward, Philip and Elizabeth tell Tuan that they're going to write a glowing report about him, and then suggest that he could have a different life, doing work that is not as dangerous or life-threatening for others, that what he's doing is just, it's not a good position. And Tuan is actually outraged. Like, he's not at all okay with this. He tells him that he has already filed his own report about the operation, admitted to his mistake of traveling to Pennsylvania to make contact with his brother, and that means they have nothing to hold over him anymore. Not that they were doing that anyway. They really have nothing to worry about. I mean, again, they have been suspicious of this kid since day one. They always thought he was going to double cross them. They always thought that he was going to betray them somehow, and truth be told, he really has. I mean, all of his ideas have kind of worked. Even the most psychotic ones, like, getting this kid to slit his wrists, really did work in the end, and I think it really does show how Tuan does know what he's doing here. And then the bombshell in his report is that he accused them of flaws in their cover, and says that he lured them to this, but they ignored them, and they protected him, but he ratted on them instead, obviously. So he wanted to put in his report that he believed the success of the mission was risked at the very end, because their commitment to reaching their goal was overridden by certain petty Borges concerns, which really wasn't that big of a deal, he thinks. And Philip says that they were concerned that Pasha would die, as patient as a real father. And Tuan says that he didn't. He told them that he wouldn't. Again, to Tuan, this is just a normal mission. He didn't really care about if he'd live or die, because he knew Pasha was going to be fine. He already taught him what he was going to do. And Elizabeth says to talk to him for a few minutes, and we get this fantastic scene between her and Tuan, which I really did love, because like I said, Tuan, no, he's not really Elizabeth's son, but in many ways, they've bonded like a true mother and son do. And this scene especially felt like they actually are mother and son. And she says that he can think whatever he wants about the way that Philip and she works or how they handle their cover, but they're running multiple operations during their time here, not just one like he is, which is true. I mean, they've had a lot of things to deal with throughout the season, between this and then the whole situation with Natalie. There was that, the whole thing that went down, which that was really the big point of that episode, to show that kind of, like I said, was their breaking point where they're kind of like, we got to get the hell out of here. They're contemplating leaving. There have just been other things corrupting their mind, and they're much more experienced than that of Tawan. Tawan has really been laser focused on this one mission when they've had, copious amount of missions scattered throughout the season. And basically, he says what he said was the truth. And basically he says the people back home who are in the field, sometimes they get what they do and sometimes they don't, and when they're in the field they have to make split-second decisions and they don't always have the luxury of thinking things through. And he says that he knows that, and she says that he should also know the center does trust them and that they do their jobs extremely well. So whatever he puts in his report isn't a problem for them, and since they're being honest here, there's something that they should know, that he's not going to make it. I love how blunt Elizabeth is here. She tells him that he's not going to make it, and he asks what she means by that, and she simply tells him that, look, it's just too hard, the work they do. It's to do it alone. He just can't possibly do it alone. I think if Elizabeth didn't have Philip, one of them would have died by now. I mean, definitely. They need to be together. They are in this thing together, and that's kind of been the thing. This has always kind of been a partner thing, and that's kind of the thing that Tawan doesn't really have. He needs that partner, and he says it's not for him. It's really not too hard. And she says that he will fail, something will happen, he'll get caught or he'll die, and one day we'll all come crashing down. He needs something, Tawan, a partner to do this with, to get through it with. And he asks if it's a woman and says to make them send you someone. Just whatever he does, make sure he has someone with him. He can't do this alone. And I kind of saw this as a reflection of Elizabeth seeing herself, where she thought that she could do this all on her own at her age. And we know the kind of things that Elizabeth had to do is very similar to things that, like, Natalie had to do. And I think she doesn't want the same thing to happen to Tawan, where he gets in over his head, because Tawan is kind of in over his head right now. He thinks this is all just going to work and that things are going to be fine for him and that he is going to perfect this entire mission, but I don't really think it's going to work as well as he thinks it does. And I think it definitely is tragic, but I think it makes a lot of sense for Tawan, who's going in there with all this hubris and all this confidence, when in reality I think he really doesn't understand the real what he's fully getting into. And I think this conversation Elizabeth had with Tawan was very vital, but also very important, especially because she's gone through it her entire life, and Tawan can't really relate to it as much. And I think that's something that they very well did set up here. This definitely is the end of Tawan for the season, which I really do love his character. I'm definitely going to miss him as a character because he was fantastic, and I really did love the relation we have with Philip, but it also, and Elizabeth, but I think it really also showed that this is the future. This is exactly, what they're setting themselves up for. They obviously don't want this thing to happen to Paige. They don't want it to happen to Tawan either, and I'm definitely interested in seeing if we're going to see possibly Tawan again, because I think this was definitely very well set up. You really do see the regret that Elizabeth really does have, but her commitment to the mission has really kept her that way throughout her entire life. She's always been very committed. She's, no matter what happens, she just can't get away, and she obviously doesn't want that same thing to happen to Tawan, who's in a much different position than Elizabeth was all those years ago, as we see. So back at the Jennings house, we see Henry. He gets his boarding school acceptance letter, and he's so overjoyed. He got in, Chris got in, it's all kind of working out. But Philip has to break the sad truth that he can't go, and that he actually doesn't want him to go in, that it isn't going to work out. And Philip says he's not going, very sternly, that this family stays together, and there's no way that they're going to break it up. Now, of course, we know the real reason why, that they're moving to Moscow, and obviously they don't want Henry to stay in America while they're in Moscow. That's just not going to work out. But it's really sad. You can really see that that confidence and just that hope that really has been holding Henry together really starting to wane here. I mean, he put everything he could into this school, and it's really sad to see that he lost. But I really do love the emphasis we've had on Henry this season. I think they really have made up for a lot of the time they haven't made up, they haven't had with him. And again, that's been very intentional. It's because of what Philip and Elizabeth, they haven't really focused on Henry. And now that they have, they want him to just remain in the family, which obviously he's starting to distance himself away, and they obviously don't want that. So then we get what is one of the most tragic scenes of the episode. We see Pastor Tim and Paige. They're handing out food to the less fortunate, to the tune of Elton John's Goodbye Yellow Brick Road. He's playing his goodbye, and she may be planning his surprise, and we get this great montage of, like I said, to the tune of Goodbye Yellowbrick Road, where we see she's saying goodbye to Pastor Tim. We see Philip and Stan are playing racquetball, and Renee stepping in for the game. And Elizabeth is then staying before her closet. She's got this memorized look, and she wanders the house, which is all full of like American stuff. And I kind of saw this as she's just taking one last second to just look at all this. Does she really want to give it all up? I mean, they have everything. They got a clothes. They got clothes. They got a great family. They really do have this great life in America. Is she really willing to give it all up? That's what I saw this scene as. Definitely, you could interpret it in different ways. That maybe she was regretting it, but I really saw it as like, do I, just her kind of taking that last second. Am I really ready to just give this all up? And we see out of the food pantry, Paige is walking home. She takes a shortcut through the parking lot where she watched her mother actually kill the would-be mugger, which I thought was really well done. This parking lot is not at all the same parking lot she used to see. Now it's this just vacant area where all she sees is violence, and the sequence cuts to which I thought, we see her go home and everything. So again, it really does show how much things has changed for Paige dramatically, and especially after Pastor Tim. That really was her last way to hold on to those glory days of just being regular Paige Jennings, who's religious and innocent, and all of that's kind of gone now. And that really was the last link to that. And now she really has transitioned into this much more mature spy. Really, she really is ready to be a spy, and I think that really is what we're setting up here. So we then cut to Philip and is hanging out with Kimberly's house, and the kids are peppering him with questions about whether he's got a girlfriend or is available, and he casually says that he might be moving to Japan. And this is the first time that Kimmy has really heard about this plan. I mean, she had no idea about this, and she's upset, saying it's so far away, and she says she doesn't know what she's going to do without him, and he says that she's going to be fine, more than fine. He's seen her grow and change, and that she has a great relation with her father now, and she's going to have a great life. And again, it's a sad scene. You can tell he really has grown this fond attachment to Kimmy. He really does care about her, and he obviously doesn't want to just take it all away. So later, he's listening to the tape he lifted from her CIA father's briefcase, and Elizabeth interrupts to ask about the fight with Henry, and she says that they'll be dealing with some other things soon enough, and again, just kind of brushes it aside because it's just not that big deal right now. Right now, they need to focus on leaving. That's really what the big thing is here. But then we get this really great scene between her and Paige where they're doing their usual fight training, and it's very rough. And this time, Paige actually gets a bloody lip in this scene, and she's completely fine with it. Like, she doesn't really think much of it, and I thought it was a really well done scene. She even says that she's done with praying. She's done with it. She doesn't want to have to do the praying stuff anymore. She doesn't really believe in it now because it kind of goes against what they're doing. But she does continue to want to do stuff for the less fortunate and things like that because that's just who she is. She likes to give back, but she's done with the church stuff, and it's really sad because I mean we know how much Paige really loved that stuff and all that kind of stuff she was doing. And the fact she is getting a bloody lip again, it really just show how much Paige is kind of toughening up, and I think very quickly we're going to see her slowly transform into Elizabeth. It definitely seems like that's where we're going, and I'm really interested in seeing if by the end of the show she is basically kind of like a young Elizabeth. I think that's kind of where we're headed here. Again, something that the season has done great is that Elizabeth and Paige have never really had the greatest relationship, but this training has really made them closer than ever, and I think it's really shown how similar these two really are, and I think, like I said, slowly we're going to start to see Paige transition into that of Elizabeth so many years ago. So as he keeps listening to the tapes, Philip then hears that Kimmy's father is being moved to lead the Soviet division from the CIA, and this is obviously big, that they may not let him go home and abandon this operation. He needs to go for a drive. I mean, this is obviously a very crucial matter. So he stands at the river's edge holding the tape, and maybe it just needs to disappear. Maybe he just needs to get rid of it so that way he can ensure that he's just gone. You can tell he's really regretting he really is contemplating whether or not should I just throw this tape away so I can just get away from it all, but unfortunately it's just not that easy. Something about it is just pulling him back in. He just can't get away from it, unfortunately, and he wants to be able to just get it to disappear, and so that way they can just have that normal life and get away from it all. But we'll get back into that a little bit. Then we get this scene with Stan that I thought was really shocking, and it was not at all the Stan scene that I thought we were going to get, because, I mean, I thought everyone thought that Stan was going to find out in this episode, right? It seemed like that's really been the keystone of the show. Well, after this scene, I don't really know if that's the case. We see back at Stan's place, the FBI man, he's cooking dinner with Renee, and he has some news for her that he's actually thinking of leaving his job. Not the bureau, but the thing that he's working on. He can't tell about the TAS operation, but he hints his current project is going to go on for a long time, and he just doesn't want to do it anymore. The kind of work he's doing, he just isn't really in favor of it. I mean, think about it. All season long, he's been outnumbered. Everyone has wanted Oleg to return, and he was the one person that was like, no, keep him there because he really does sympathize with him. He knows what that would do to Oleg. He really cares about him. He has that relationship with Oleg, and no one else really does. And he's very worried about Sophia and the risks that she's facing, and he doesn't want that guilt anymore. He doesn't want Sophia to turn out like Nina. He knows very well what all of this did to Nina, and he doesn't want it to happen to Sophia, obviously. He sees, I think, a lot of just optimism in her, and he doesn't want that all to go away, and he wants her to be able to, adhere to her, but unfortunately, he just can't do that because of his job. And Renee then tells him that he's a good person, that not many people care about him like, not many people care like he does, and that she knows he's been feeling stressed, but part of her is really happy that he's leaving, but she can't help but think that his department needs someone like him, who's not afraid to push back and stand up when something's wrong, and if she doesn't do it, who will, and if he doesn't do it, who will? So this scene right here very much makes me think that Renee is not a Soviet spy. There's no way. I mean, if she was a Soviet spy, I feel like she'd want Stan to leave. She'd just be like, oh yeah, absolutely, you should leave. That's kind of what's going on here. But the fact that she's pulling him in, I don't think she's working for Stan. I think definitely I think she's just a normal girl. I think Philip has had this suspicion. I can understand why, but I don't think she's a Soviet spy. There's nothing really there's not enough evidence that really does prove to me that she is one. So I think definitely she's not a Soviet spy. I think this scene definitely does confirm that. Even though we didn't actually hear her physically say it, I think that she pretty much is a Soviet spy. So we then get this scene with Philip and Paige that is pretty much different from any scene we got with them, because Philip has kind of always been, the one that's always like emotional towards Paige and always cares about her and things like that. But things have really changed for both of them. Philip comes home, he finds Paige icing her lip. He apologizes for what they've done. Basically everything. He says, look, I'm sorry I put you through this. I wish you had that normal life. And I think it kind of all goes back to what Gabriel said, that he never really should have gotten Paige involved. They never really needed to. Just because the center wanted to doesn't mean they had to listen to them. And obviously, they were just so connected to the center that they didn't really see another option. They had to pull Paige in, and now they've basically destroyed her entire life. I mean, she's a completely different person from who she used to be, and there's really no fixing it. I think that Philip very well knows that, but I like that he did try to apologize here, because he's realizing what this has really done to Paige, and he doesn't want that to happen to anyone else. So upstairs, he asks Elizabeth to go sit with him somewhere, and we get the final scene here where he talks about, the tape he got from Kimmy, and that he was going to get rid of it, just pretend like it never happened. He still thinks it maybe would be better, but he doesn't know, and he tells about Kimmy's father's promotion, and maybe they can find someone else, get their coins from Kimmy, but he doesn't trust them. He's torn about whether to remain in their jobs. Is he really ready to just abandon it all? I mean, they have other missions to tend to, so she says it's not just him having a hard time, it's her too, and the kids. They're not allowed to really have a life. And I mean, that's exactly the truth here, is that they're not allowed to have a normal life. They're always forced to have to go on these heinous missions that they just frankly don't want to do anymore, and he knows that. But Elizabeth, unfortunately, says something that I thought is just really tragic, that she simply can't. She just can't fully pull out of this. She's too committed to her country. She's too committed to her career. And she's always been that career-driven woman, and nothing has really changed. She just can't get out of it, and she can't let go of her life, either way. And I kind of saw it as she can't let go of either one. Like, she needs to have both in her life. And she tells him at the head of the Soviet division that she's sorry that they're staying, and that there really is no other question too. But she does think that he should pull out, that he shouldn't be involved in this anymore. She sees what it's really done to him. But unfortunately, he knows that she needs a partner, that she can't possibly do this alone. She thinks that she can do it alone, but unfortunately, he knows that he needs to be by her side. It seems like they're going to go on one last mission, thereby forfeiting their chance to leave, the center. And they're now going to continue what they're doing, and that is the way the season comes to a very tragic end. But let's just get in this episode and where we're going to go in the final season of the show. So, wow, I mean, this finale really did surprise me in basically every way. I thought this was going to be a much more riveting finale, and it really was, but not in the sense that you think it would be. It wasn't like the season 2 finale, which I don't think they're ever going to top, to be honest with you. I think season 6 might, but so far they have not topped that finale. That finale is still one of the most intense episodes the show has ever done. It's still one of my favorite episodes of the show, and I don't think they're going to top it for a while. They haven't. I mean, season 3 didn't top it, season 4 didn't, this season didn't. But what was great about this finale is that it was a big reflective finale, and that's a lot of what the season was. It was a very reflective sort of season. But let's talk about now what Elizabeth and Philip have done, because it seemed like they were ready to get out, like they were just done with all this, and that they were gonna finally be able to leave the center after years of hoping to do that. I mean, this is something Philip has been wanting to do from the very first scene of the show. He has always wanted to leave the center, and it seemed like they were ready, but unfortunately there are just too many things on their mind that keep pulling them back in, and they just can't get out. And it's one of those things where this is their choice. Like, this isn't someone telling them, oh, you can't get out. This is them realizing that, no, we can't possibly just leave all this. There are other things we're leaving behind, and I think they simply want to do that because they don't want anyone else to have to replace them. I think they know what they're doing is obviously extremely dangerous, but this is what they've done for so many years, and they don't want anyone else to have to, go into that position. And, something that dangerous and just so time consuming, and it takes away your life, like, anything. They don't want anyone to have to do that. They want someone to have a much more selfish life. They want someone to be able to be self-sufficient and make choices for themselves and be independent. They want that, and they really have not been able to do any of that. They've always had to adhere to what the center does, and they've, right when they were ready to pull out, unfortunately they found a way to be pulled back in. So it really is tragic. I really was convinced they were going back to Russia. And truthfully, I think that could still be an option. I think that still could be in the cards somehow. Maybe Claudia will find a way or something like that. But it does seem like this is what's going to happen, that they're going to go back to spying and that they're going to go for this one last mission. And we'll have to see really how that's going to go. You can tell that Elizabeth doesn't want Phil to continue this because she knows what it's doing to him. I mean, Philip is arguably the most emotional man on TV. He's like the saddest man on TV right now. We've seen what this has done to him in every way, and he's really ready to leave. But unfortunately, again, he's just so far into this that leaving now is just not an option, unfortunately. I think he really wishes it was, but I think he knows in his soul that it's just not an option. It kind of sucks, but that's just kind of the truth of the matter. As far as Stan, let's talk about this huge thing with Stan, because he had this huge revelation that maybe I want to leave my job. I want to still be in the bureau, but I don't want to be, trying to, I don't want to be trying to catch Soviets anymore. That's just not who I really am. And honestly, after he says this, I'm going to be honest with you guys. I don't know if Stan's ever going to find out the truth about Philip and Elizabeth, and I don't really think he needs to. I think Stan's in a place now where he has so much sympathy for the Soviets, and he's so unlike the other FBI agents that if he would find out, he wouldn't really care. I think he'd feel more for them. I think honestly, he'd want to help them out more. I think it would, just be they'd just be closer with him. I don't think he would really feel betrayed by this at all, honestly. I think, honestly, now where Stan is, he's in a position where he is so tight with the Jennings that they could say that to him, and he wouldn't really care, because, we know how tight he is with Oleg, and we know, what happened with Oleg and everything. And sure, he doesn't have the history that he does with Oleg, with with the Jennings that he has with Oleg, that's true, but I don't really know if he's going to find out. I think it's something that we've kind of thought was going to happen, but I don't know if it's actually going to happen in this show. I think Stan and the Jangs are in such different places that I don't know if that's really going to happen. But we'll have to see the way that turns out. Like I said, I don't think Renee's a spy. There's not enough evidence for me to really think about it. I just don't think that she could possibly be one. Again, I could be wrong, but I don't think she is a spy. We'll have to see the way that does go down. Let's talk about Paige, because like I said, Paige, I think out of everyone, arguably, had the biggest transition here. She went from this really Catholic, really innocent girl who loved religion and loved helping people and just wanted to be this peacemaker and always was, helping the Peace Corps and things like that. And she was so devoted to Pastor Tim. Pastor Tim was like her only friend. And now she's the complete opposite. She's very destructive. She's very not violent, but not as many things are getting to her. She's kind of cold and things like that. So I do think she is kind of transitioning into that of Elizabeth, and it's sad to see. But when Philip is telling her, I wish, we could have gotten out of this. I wish you could have gotten a normal life. It's great, but it's just kind of too late now, and I think he knows that. I think he knows that there's nothing they can do. I mean, they can apologize all they want, but this is the life that Paige has now, and it's kind of their fault, and there's not really much they can do about that, unfortunately, which sucks, but that's just kind of the fact of the matter is that that is her life, and they can't really change that, unfortunately. I think they wish they could, but they just couldn't really do anything there. So I really did love that scene. I think it was definitely one of the highlights of the episode, and especially of this season, is really seeing Paige's growth. That's something we really have focused on tremendously this season. Then the other thing to really talk about, like I said, Oleg was not in this episode, which was very strange, but I did like what we got with Martha here, where I think this child adopting Ola, I think her name is really going to make things for Martha for the better. I think it's really going to change her for the better. I think she's finally going to feel happy again. I think she's finally going to be in a place where she can feel relaxed and things like that. And I think this is really, that child is really what she needs for happiness. And I think she's finally going to feel satisfied in Russia. And I hope that's the case. I hope she does adopt this child. I hope she doesn't kill herself, because now I really just want to see her adopt this child. I think it's the perfect arc for her, and it would be the perfect way to close things out. After all the sorrow that Martha's gone through, it would be such a satisfying end to see her finally have a happy life with this child. And I really hope the show is going in that direction. And it can, honestly. She's not really a part of the Jennings arc anymore, and I really hope she isn't pulled back in like they are. I kind of have a feeling she's going to be, but I really do hope she does adopt this child and things do work out for the better for her. So we'll have to see the way that all goes down. Overall, guys, I really was a fan of this finale. It was much different than what I thought it was going to be, but I still thought it was a very, very well done introspective finale. And I'm absolutely going to give the Americans Season 5, Episode 13, the Soviet Division, a 4.75 out of 5, or an A. And now, guys, let's talk about the season, because what a different kind of season this has really been. I mean, the creators of the show said it in the beginning that there wasn't going to be as much spying, and not only was there's not as much spying, there was barely any spying this season, which I think kind of worked for them. They focused a lot more on the characters' idiosyncrasies and the difference of what they're really going through, the different transitions that they're going on, their home life and their external life, all the things that are going on with them externally, internally rather than externally. And I think it was definitely very well represented here, how we could see the transition in Elizabeth, that she's starting to care more for Americans, or how Philip, what Est is doing to him, and how upset he really is becoming, or what they did with Paige. I mean, all that stuff was much different than a typical American season. It felt a lot more intimate, and that's one of the reasons why I am defending this season. I know a lot of people said this season was too slow. I didn't see it that way. I saw it as just a more intimate kind of standalone season. I think it worked for the better for them, honestly, because they know they do have, that last season where they can go balls to the wall and do whatever they want. And truthfully, to be honest with you guys, this show has never been an action show. So the fact that a lot of people are shocked, I don't really know why. The show has always been a dialogue-driven show, and it's always been riveted by dialogue and things like that. It's never really been an action show. When it has action, it's incredible, and they do an amazing job with it. But it never has been a spy thriller. It's been disguised as a spy thriller, but in reality it is a family drama, and this season really did show that. It focused a lot on that family, and it also focused a lot more on characters that we really haven't seen a lot of, like, say, Henry, or a Martha, or a Gabriel, or a Claudia, or even a Kimmy, or even Tawan. Really, they focused a lot more on these characters that I think would have been pushed to the back in other seasons, but here really were very much focused on. It was kind of like what they did with William last year, but even more so in this season. I think it really worked out for the better for them. I really did love the way that translated this season. I think it really did work out, like I said, in the best way. I was very impressed with the way things worked out there. Stan's arc in general, I also really did love. Oleg, I thought, was also really great. Really, if I had to have one complaint with this season, that there were just a lot of things that I thought were kind of pushed to the side, and I think they definitely could have focused on a bit more. Whether that be the whole thing going on with the food shortage or things like that, or where they were really going with Oleg, or even with Misha. There were just other things I think they could have focused on just a little bit more. And the pacing of the season, it was very slow. I will definitely say that. And there were some episodes that were a little bit unnecessarily slow, particularly ones in the beginning half. For a while, I didn't really know where the show was going, and I do think they could have picked up the pace just a little bit. But I understand they had another season to do that, and hopefully season 6 really does pick pay off. They have 10 episodes. They can really do whatever they want, and I am very excited to see where they go in this final season. Overall, guys, when it comes down to it, the things about the Americans that are usually great are still great. The acting, the characters, the great spy thrills, which wasn't as much this season, but when it was there, because it was such a rarity, it was very impressive. Whether it be the whole Natalie heist thing that we had in episode 11, I mean that was insane, or what happened in the season premiere, little things like that. Again, because it was such a rarity, it made it even more satisfying. It made it even more of not a delight, but it made it even more compelling to watch. And I think it really did further enhance a lot of the tension going on this season. A lot of the tension going on, like I said, was internal conflicts rather than external. I thought there was something that was very well represented. A lot of it was more human stuff rather than them going on these missions. And I thought that was definitely very well handled. I know a lot of people can say that not a lot happened this season because in the end they decided not to go back to Russia. But I think it just kind of showed that Philip and Elizabeth haven't completely changed. Like, sure, they might have changed a little bit, but in their heart, they always will be devoted to this mission. They always feel it's their duty to do what they need to do. This is just kind of their last mission, and then they can leave, and we'll really have to see how that turns out. Overall, guys, I really did enjoy the season. Is this as good as last season? Hell no. Last season was so much more eventful. There were more deaths. I do think Oleg could have been killed off. I think easily they could have killed him off, definitely. I do think they could have revealed more about Renee and things like that, but I'm really not complaining. I was overall very satisfied with this season, and I'm definitely going to give the Season of American Season 5 a 4.75 out of 5 or an A. So overall, guys, that's it. The Americans is now over. Let me know what you guys thought of this season overall. Loved your thoughts on it. Again, I can understand if you guys weren't a huge fan of it because it was definitely a slower paced season. I personally think it worked out for the better. I was impressed with the way things did work out this season. I want to thank you guys, of course, for watching my reviews over these 13 episodes. Definitely really enjoyed reviewing them to you guys. Can't wait for the final season. I can't believe next season is the final season. It's crazy, but all good things must come to an end, of course. So it's sad that all these shows are kind of ending at the same time, but that's just kind of, I guess, the era we're in with TV right now. But that's my review. Hope you guys enjoy it. We'll see you guys in my next video, which will be for the third Pirates film. As you guys know, I am doing my Pirates collabs with Tony Estrada right now. We will most likely get up to Outworld's end review tomorrow, and we'll see you guys for that. Okay, bye.